Warning. Today's show may contain information that does not align with what you have read from random, unaccredited Twitter accounts. If you cannot contain yourself to the point where you need to send awful things to people because it doesn't say exactly what you want, please click off the video now or forever hold your peace. This is today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is indeed the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate you listening. Really appreciate you tuning in and talking to us, of course, as always, getting involved in the chat box. Thank you so much to all of you for being involved and so much of you always for listening this morning. Good morning to those of you joining us live. We've got Brian and Barry in the chat box. We've got Matt and Alawe. We've got Stephen. We've got Paul. We've got Front Row. We've got D in the chat box. Rowan and Colin and Evan in the chat. Tyrell also with us today. We've got Claire. We've got D. We've got Maximius. We've got Rob and Paul and plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. Thank you so much for always listening and always tuning in. If you're here for the first time, thank you so much. Please do drop a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're new. Even if you're not new, you don't need to be new to just drop a like. We try and reach 1,000 on the show every single day. So help us out. Click that like button. And without further ado, let's not waste any more time and jump into today's stories. Let's jump, shall we, into our first slide of the day. Which was a pretty incredible moment, actually. I can't remember the last time Arsenal as a club had as many Ballon d'Or nominations as we saw yesterday. There may be a time where this has been the case before, in which case I'm sure our brilliant Arsenal dedicated listeners will tell us a time. But Arsenal celebrated not a handful, not even a couple of handfuls, but 15 different nominations at this year's Ballon d'Or Awards, which is utterly incredible, really. The whole Arsenal women's team have been nominated for the Club of the Year. Renee Slegers has been nominated for Coach of the Year. And of course, a number of the Arsenal women's team have been nominated for the Ballon d'Or Award, and Michelle Adjiman has been nominated for the Copper Trophy, which is for the youngster category. But Mariona Caldente, Steph Catley, Emily Fox, Chloe Kelly, Frida Marnham, Alessia Russo, and Leah Williamson have all been nominated for the Ballon d'Or this year, which is an absolute what an achievement that is. I think it's Caldente and Russo are up there as, you know, being very, very likely, I think, as being two potential winners. Chloe Kelly, of course, has been mainly an impact player for Arsenal and for England, but has been making huge impacts, massive, massive impacts. And Daphne Van Domselaar has been nominated for the Women's Yashin Trophy as well, of course, on the goalkeeper side. Miles Lewis Skelly has been nominated for the Copper Trophy as well. He's amongst the youngsters that have also been nominated. David Raya has been nominated for the Yashin Trophy as well after back-to-back Premier League Golden Glove awards. And Declan Rice and Victor Gyökeres have been nominated for the Men's Ballon d'Or Trophy as well. So, yeah, an amazing achievement for Arsenal, particularly, of course, on the women's team and what they have achieved in Europe this season, both for club and for many of them for country as well, is such a massive achievement. So congratulations to all of the nominees across the club for all the different categories in the competition. But yes, absolutely excellent to see. Now, yes, today's kind of transfer show revolves around two major stories, which is regarding Ebere Eze and Rodrygo, and they kind of all link together. So it's difficult to put them all into one slide. So we've broken them up a little bit. But yesterday, of course, as you will have seen, did a story around midday. Well, actually, I mean, it's the whole of yesterday's story starts with kind of the 8 a.m. show. Because in that 8 a.m. show, obviously, I kind of told you that my feeling around Arsenal's hopes of signing Ebere Eze had diminished at this point in time. They had diminished, and I had, basically come into him with some information where a move for Eze at this point in time is unlikely. As of this moment, I'm not expecting Arsenal to sign Ebere Eze. Now, it is a transfer window, and that means that anything can happen and things can change, of course, and that's very, very important. But I reported the story yesterday that Ethan Nwaneri's contract being signed, and more so this is kind of the main reason. But also in that story, I included the progression of Max Dowman and his performances in pre-season, which have kind of crystallized the club's excitement around him and his ability to play at the senior level, which before today we only had evidence of during the training sessions, of course, because he's been involved in the training sessions with the senior team for a long time now. But this was the only opportunity that we obviously had to see Max Dowman play at a senior level. And it's my understanding that particularly Ethan Nwaneri's contract has impacted Arsenal's plans this summer. And if I just change the slide to Eze, the move for Eze at this moment is unlikely unless things change. Significant things would need to change for Eze to join Arsenal. And this is why I have to say I am sorry. Not because I've done anything wrong. You'll be surprised to know. It does happen now and again, believe me. But I'm sorry because when this story came out, I'm sorry that it upset so many people to the point where they felt the need to send some pretty awful things my way. And it just does seem to be that if you report positive news, as we have done, I broke the interest of Arsenal in Eze in May, early on in the window, on the Football London website. And that's because the interest was and remains real. Like, the interest in Eze is still there. It's not gone. It still remains. He's a player that they like. And he's a player that, to my knowledge as well, is prioritising Arsenal. If he is to leave Crystal Palace, the number one club that he would like to go to my understanding, is Arsenal. But the issue that we find ourselves in is that for this to happen, a lot of other things would need to change. And Arsenal's focus right now in the window is on outgoings. As I have been telling you since Victor Gyökeres arrived, outgoings is the focus. If certain factors fall into place, this scenario could change into a more positive space. But even if it does change, even if Arsenal do manage to move players on, like Trossard, like Vieira, like Lokonga, like Nelson, like Karl Hein, like Zinchenko, if Arsenal can move on some of, if not maybe all of these players, it could be that changes where they are. It changes where they would look at a potential move for an Eze. But I still think that there is more likelihood, actually, that they look to sign a more traditional left winger. But I think that a left winger would be the more traditional profile that they would choose. And as we know, and as we've been discussing, even though Eze can play on the left, he is seen by the club more so as kind of a central figure. And so when I broke this story yesterday, obviously a lot of backlash followed. And then later on in the evening, and make sure you go and watch FK's episode with Sammy Mokbel on Latte Firm. Sammy, furthered the point that I'd been saying earlier on in the day, and he was asked by FK, do you think, Eze will happen? He said, do I think Eze will happen? As of today, I would say not happening. So you don't have to believe me. I know I'm not the guy with the street cred, the same as your Davids, your Fabs, and your Sammys out there, but take it from Sammy, if not from me, that at this moment in time, a move for Eze is unlikely. And so I guess a lot of you might ask the question, well, why has it kind of been such a storm? Why has there been such a a storm around Eze? Why has his name been so greatly kind of pushed into the mainstream? And, I'm definitely guilty, of this as well. We've talked about Eze a lot. We've talked about a lot of theory behind it. And I think that the reality is that there is a lot of theory there based upon some realities. The realities being that Eze wants to move. Palace are open to selling because they think they recognise at 27 years of age that this is going to be a great point for them to make maximum value on him. They've already won an FA Cup and achieved something amazing with Eze at the club being at the point that is. You may remember back to the summer of 2024, Parish, of course, the higher up at Palace, was on TalkSport talking about how he was so shocked that no one had come in for Eze during the window of 2024. I mean, I don't know about you, but this is just me theorizing again. But that strikes that if there's a chairman or an owner or somebody out there that doesn't want a player to be sold, I wouldn't be saying on the radio that they're shocked nobody came in for him. Yes, I would be keeping things very much quiet. I wouldn't even be doing the interview. So the sounds are that this has been kind of, the Palace side, the players' side, and Arsenal's side of this. Was very much linked to Ethan Nwaneri's future more than anything else. And I have to hold my hands up here, and this is where I do say sorry, because it was the conversations that I'd had at the time where Ethan Nwaneri's renewal was that Arsenal's interest had remained. And to my knowledge, it still is there. But the renewal of Ethan Nwaneri certainly was more impactful and more important than I had initially been made aware at that point. And Ethan Nwaneri's contract renewal, when it was still like in the balance and there was kind of a moment where we didn't really know necessarily where he was going to sign, Arsenal did their due diligence. And that's what we've learned from Andrea Berta, is that Andrea Berta will cover Arsenal. He will make sure that if there is a scenario where we might be looking to lose a player, that they have advanced across different profiles so that we're not scrapping around desperately trying to find a replacement, that we would have already put in work. And that we would already put in the effort to try and get that player secured quickly if something changes. So that's kind of where we're at with the Eze thing. So it sucks. Without a doubt, I would sincerely love to see Eze. I've been on the Eze hype train for a while, like Elliot has, like so many of us have, FK has. We would love to see Eze at Arsenal. And we've been talking about Eze a lot, kind of in the context of almost expecting it to be a deal that will happen. But the information that has kind of come out in the last 48 hours has changed that scenario. And that the confidence around a potential deal for Eze moving to Arsenal at this point is not as strong as what we previously kind of were feeling around this. And that has come out, and it's something of a delay since the Nwaneri thing. Now, I could have sat here and just said and just ignored that, as some people seemingly wanted me to do. It's a strange world where you're celebrated if you report good news, you're vilified if you report news which people don't want to hear. But that's not how I do things. That's not how I want to talk about the situations with you. I don't just want to discuss good news. I have to, if I hear something, I don't want to keep it to myself. It's not within me. I want to talk to you about it, and I want to be clear with you about what the situation is as to my understanding within the realms that I can discuss it. So I'm sorry, but that's kind of the reality of the job. So the last thing I want to talk about this morning before we go into the chat box and part two is obviously the Rodrygo loan stuff. So again, this is a really strange story because you may remember on the show that we talked about the loan idea for Rodrygo. I mean, the chat box now, you feel free to write this in there. You'll probably be able to remember that we discussed the theory, the hypothesis that the only really way that we could see Arsenal signing Rodrygo was if Martinelli was to leave and bring in a significant amount of funds to kind of make this happen, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. But the other potential way that Arsenal could have done a deal for Rodrygo, and only without any kind of substance to the story, we were just talking and discussing about how, as fans, that we might see a deal happen. You'll remember that about a week ago, just over a week ago, that we talked about a loan with an obligation, or a loan with an option, or just a loan, because Real Madrid have done things like this before with James Rodriguez to Bayern Munich, or even Martin Odegaard to Arsenal on loan, which didn't have an option on it, but it led, of course, to a eventual transfer. Now, since we had those discussions, I've seen reports out there, or ITKs out there, that don't have kind of the level of credibility as some of like the likes of, had of Arsenal or Team News and Ticks, for instance, talking about this idea that Arsenal are exploring a loan deal with Real Madrid. Now, I want to make this very clear. I have heard absolutely no categoric suggestions at all that Arsenal are looking to do that. I've heard zero to suggest that that is the case. There was a report in the Times, of course, that a friend of ours, Gary Jacob, reported around the idea of Arsenal, waiting for a potential option. Again, I feel that report was kind of, again, theory. Like, it was a theory, that it wasn't a case of reporting that particular line. And obviously, when it comes from, people with credibility, even if we're just kind of putting our opinions out there, it gets packaged into an aggregated kind of tweet, and then ripped out of a massive 1,000-word article and put on its own, and that gives it more weight. It gives it a different type of context as well. So, is this a deal that I think will happen? Again, no. I would be very surprised if Arsenal can complete a loan move for Rodrygo. Is it impossible? No, it's the transfer window. Anything can happen. But as I sit here right now, and as Answer says, this information on Rodrygo just could be coming from the discussions that we had on here. And there is a little tiny part of me that thinks that that could be the case. I remember shows where we talked about things, and the next day I would see a story in the news about something we'd just been discussing and theorizing. And I couldn't believe it. So it has happened. It does happen. And this idea of talking about a loan for Rodrygo, in theory, it makes sense if it would be possible. But and I think, again, I recommend you go over and listen to Sammy's stuff on FK's Latte Ferb show yesterday. He talks a lot about the Rodrygo loan thing, and again, kind of says the sentiments that we've also been talking about. So, and obviously the challenges with this deal are the finances that are attached to it, the players' wages that are attached to it, that are significant. You're looking at well over 10 million a year, potentially in wages. You're looking at, a significant loan fee, and then obviously a commitment to a bigger fee next summer as well. And at the moment, we can't do anything really until we move some players on. And that's the scenario that Arsenal are in right now, is that we are currently in a situation where we need to move players on first. We've spent nearly £200 million on players, not to mention the wages that are attached to those players. And we have only brought in 5-ish million quid. That's it. 5-ish million quid. That's all we've got. Tavares and Marquinhos are the only ones who have gone. We cannot operate without moving some players on first. So until we do that, this is the signings. This is where we're at. If Arsenal don't successfully move players on in this window, this is potentially all that there is going to be. And I say that like that's a bad thing. I think it's because we've kind of built up in our minds what we've wanted. 6 signings is what I asked for, ironically, at the beginning of the window. I said I wanted 5 or 6 signings, so we've achieved that. And yet I still sit here with a sense of disappointment that we might not get a 7th. And that's I get the irony of that, and I get the greediness in some ways that kind of portrays. But in my mind, Arsenal need a 3rd attacking addition in this window. That's kind of where my head's at. I feel like we need that 3rd attacking player. And if it is of any encouragement to you, it is my understanding that Arsenal have wanted that too. That it has been a plan from the beginning of the summer that we would be in a position, well, we would be wanting to sign 3 attacking options during this window. But it might be that was, of course, linked in with the potential futures of players that could yet and have not yet moved from the club. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And that's kind of what it is. And I know that that's not what people want to hear, but I'm not going to frilly this up for you and say something that's not for clicks and attention like you might see on your social media platforms. I'm just not going to do it. So I'm really sorry. But as of right now, that is the scenario. I really hope that things change between now and the end of the window, because I think that, you know, if we don't bring in that third attacking player, then we've missed a trick. You know, especially if we say sell a couple of players and still don't, that's going to be really, really frustrating for people. If Leo was to, I think I talked to Ballon, I said I'm at 8 out of 10 in the window so far. I can't really see myself dropping below an 8 out of 10 because the work we've done incomings wise has been unreal. Like, we've signed the top goal scorer in Europe for the last 2 seasons. We've signed the best number 6 on the market. We've brought in, in my opinion, a really interesting forward in Madueke, and to see kind of what he can produce, and he gives us something different on the left and the right. And I just think that, you know, the feeling around Madueke is so unfair, because people are just looking at it and going, "Oh, well, we signed him instead of signing a Rodrygo," and that's just not the reality. The Madueke deal was always separate to that third attacker, but it was reliant on Arsenal moving players out soon. And it was a simpler deal to do at the time. So they've gone and prioritised and got that deal done. And then, of course, they brought in the depth. They brought in Kepa. They brought in Norgard. They brought in Mosquera for a combined 30 million quid. So less than that, I think. So I can't really go below an 8. I think that the sentiment will be lower than that for a lot of fans because of just not getting that third attacking signing. But for me, I always said that if we got Eze, it would take me from an 8 to a 9, and I would say it would be a 9 out of 10 window. So the focus right now is on moving those players on. If Arsenal can successfully move some players on, then there's a chance that we get that mythical 7th signing. So yeah, but that's it. That's where I'm at. Let's get a part 2. Let's brave the chat box and get some of your questions right after this. Right, this is part 2 of today's show, where, of course, we'll be jumping into the chat box and tackling some of your questions and getting some of your thoughts as well in the chat box too. So let's do that, and let's get some of your feelings. Let's scroll up, shall we, and go to our organizer. Says Tom, the problem is selling normally happens late in the window. So another signing is the same. I personally think that we've done our business. Carl says it's always hard to shift subpar players on high wages, and the club's done some silly things, of course, in the past. Derek says, Tom, Arsenal are pathetic. A blind man would see our attack is not the same as on the same level as City and Liverpool. A striker keeps means quiet. The usual, do enough to stay top 4. I don't agree, Derek. Personally, I think Arsenal's attack of Saka and Gyökeres, and then potentially one of 3 options on the left of Madueke, Martinelli, and Trossard at the moment, of course, depending on what could still change. I mean, to say that's not a great attack or not puts us into the top echelons of attacks in the league, I would disagree with you. I especially think the depth in midfield is excellent. I think the depth we've got at the back line is excellent. So I would disagree with you, Derek, is where I'm at. You know, at the end of the day, we have 2 competitive options in every single position. So that's the thing. Aloy says, Tom, can you tell us where exactly you got the news and info from? Don't just say from a reliable source as usual with loads of reasons you can't say. Thanks. Okay, Aloy, I'll probably just not answer your question instead because you won't like the answer. You ask any journalist where their info source is from, or where the specific source of their info has come from, and just let me know which ones have told you, because I'll be curious to know if they do. Dan and Dylan says, Tom, any other amazing forward players that are under the radar at the moment for a loan? other than the obvious. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling, mate. I am. So I couldn't give you an obvious candidate to my knowledge that would be available on a loan. Just off the top of my head, without any sit down and research, I would struggle. Even with sit down and research, I think I'd struggle a little bit. It's the loan market necessarily is not necessarily there. The only one really, people think about the Rodrygo situation, but that's just theory. It doesn't really come from anything concrete right now. And I hate that word, but that is the word. Bruh says Madueke is cheap signing if we pay in installments. That's why we bought him in. It has nothing to do with his quality. It was the structure that Chelsea, of course, offered. I mean, yeah, it's true. People just kind of look at the price tag and think, what? Tanaka says the Madueke purchase looks more idiotic by the day. Striker and left wing was always the main issue. Just to remind me where he came on the other day. He came on at left wing, right? And that's where Arteta believes that he can play as well as on the right. There's a belief that he can play on both sides. And I mean, people haven't even given him a chance yet. Like, that's what annoys me, is that people make these conclusions without giving him a chance to see what he can do. That's what frustrates me the most, I think, is that there's judgments made about players without even having seen what they're going to do, what they can do at Arsenal. Patrick says that the club wanted Eze as much as we were told by the media. And if his signing now depends on sales, why didn't we sign him before Madueke? Is it a fair way to say Arteta prioritised Madueke over Arsenal? I guess the question here, Patrick, to you before being able to answer is this like, as we were told by the media, in this sense of like, that they wanted Eze as much as we were told. What we are and have been discussing, even before this news we've discussed today, is that Arsenal have had an interest in him. That interest peaked at the point that the Nwaneri contract situation was still unresolved at that point. And after the Nwaneri contract was resolved, the interest remained. It didn't disappear. It didn't strengthen. It may have actually simmered slightly, and we weren't getting as strong a links. If anything, we were getting more so from the players' side, around the idea that the player was very keen on the move. More so from the Palace side of things, where they were willing to kind of negotiate more so around the release clause, and that the release clause wasn't necessarily something that Arsenal were worried about, because they knew that Palace were kind of, more malleable in any potential talks. The idea of Arteta prioritising Madueke over Eze, yes, but I told you that ages ago. And there's a very good reason why that happened. And that's because if you look across the squad and all these positions we were talking about, and I said we've got two players in every single position, before we made the signings that we made this summer, the position, where we didn't have two players in each position was centre forward, because we only had Kai Havertz there and an injured Jesus. So one player. And on the right wing with Saka, and then some players who can play in that role, but whose main roles lie elsewhere. Odegaard has Nwaneri, Rice has Marino, Zubimendi has Norgard, Martinelli has Trossard, Calafiori and Lewis Skelly, Kivior and Gabriel, Saliba now Mosquera, which is another area we need to sign in, of course, Timber White. And so they prioritise making sure first we got the players in so that we have two players in every single position on the field. The benefit of Madueke, of course, being that he can also play on the left, and came on the field the other day on the left. And I think he will play on the left a lot. But we had to make sure we brought in a player that could give us that cover to Saka if we needed. And we already had two left wingers. So that's why the order of those signings went the way that it did in that sense. And says, Tom, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I watched back Sammy's interview regarding when he was talking about Sesko and that we'll sign him over Gyökeres. How did that work out? Well, I mean, Anthony, it's probably best in these situations to use quotes when you kind of like bring up potentially other people involved in this. So you're going to have to go and get me the quotes first. But we all know, Anthony, that Sesko was the number one target. He was who Arsenal were pushing to sign at the start of the window. And it looked like potentially that could be a deal that would happen. The thing that wasn't really expected was just how stubborn Leipzig would be around the price. And that stubbornness has been rewarded to a degree, because Man United have paid nearly the 90 million euros that they have ended up wanting. So You're going to have to get me some quotes, Anthony, around that one because I'm not quite sure of the context. Jabu says, I feel like we are being dishonest here. We can't say that we have a great attack if the left wing and left side is dysfunctional. It is really not a bad thing to criticize the strategy, guys. Centre forward and right wing is good. I'm with Jabu in the sense that I don't think personnel is the main issue for our left-hand side. I think it's a system thing. The system is, for me, the priority issue with our left. Like that's for me is the number one issue. It's how we play. It's a coaching thing. That for me is the big thing about our left-hand side. So from my perspective, even if you were to say sign a Rodrygo, for example, it would improve things, but I don't think it would solve things because I still think that systematically there is an issue on our left flank. That needs to be solved and changed, and we need to improve. And I think Madueke potentially can help to do that. But obviously, I would think that also signing a more natural left-wing player would also do great things as well. Vacan says, I believe a new attacker comes in. Arteta really wants one. I mean, as we've said from the start of the window, Arsenal would have liked, and that, of course, means Arteta, 3 offensive signings. But that third offensive signing, as we have always said, it's never not been the case. That third offensive signing always been reliant on Arsenal moving players out. We have to move players out because we've spent close to £200 million and we've sold less than 10. So within UEFA financial fair play regulations, we have to work within them, and the club want to work within them comfortably, not just up to the line. They want to work comfortably within them. So that's why they're always looking now to sell first. Matt says, morning, Tom from the US. Love the show. Thanks, mate. Very much appreciated. Brendan's also been a member now for 23 months. And Jashar's been a member for 54. Incredible commitment from you all. Thank you so much for the kind words in the chat box. Of course, there's nearly 2,000 of you watching. If you've not yet dropped a like on the video, please do. We try and reach 1,000 likes on the show every single day, even when it's not even the news we want to hear. So, yeah, that's what I'm grateful for. Avinash says, if we don't sign Eze, Rodrygo will be the perfect signing for Arsenal. He isn't a touchline winger. He's very much like to operate through the middle of the pitch and bring in much needed change. I'd sincerely hope that one of the two is brought in. I would love to. I'd love to see Arsenal sign another forward player. But they're going to need to sell first. I can keep saying it. I can keep going around in circles with you, but until they do get moved on, no, they don't. Anthony says, Tom, Sammy McBell if everything went according to plan and they got the player they wanted, it would have been Sesko. Yeah, so what I don't know where the devil's advocate to that is, Anthony, because we all know that's the case. We've known that the whole summer. If everything went to plan, Arsenal would have signed Sesko. So I don't really know where the devil's advocate is there to the whole. From the way you've put across the previous comment, it makes it sound like you're saying, I'm not inclined to believe Sammy's thoughts on Eze because he said that if everything went to plan, we would have signed Sesko. But that's true. And that's never not been true. So I don't know what the devil's advocate there is, Anthony. I really don't know. Sorry. I just don't get it. Ilias says, I don't see myself lasting this season without deactivating X or at least disassociating with some of the reactions I've seen after a friendly has been disappointing. I mean, disappointed puts it politely, mate. It really, really, really puts it very, very lightly. Samuel says, I love people raging about the Madueke signing as though they've already forgotten how much damage losing Saka for a few months was to our title challenge, as we had no backup to him. Ragamuffin says, agreed, the system on the left is the problem. Martinelli often isolated. Different personnel won't change that. Try swapping Rice and Odegaard, but inverting the left back is the problem. The midfield is definitely a part of it. I think the structure of the midfield. It's not just about the left winger. It is about the structure of the midfield. And I was talking to Andrew yesterday. If you listened to the Arscast yesterday, I was talking about the idea that when Rice arrived, for me, I was like, okay, we've got our Rodri now. He is going to be our Rodri, but he became this number 8, and I think he's a very good number 8. But I think we've almost married ourselves to this idea now that Rice is our number 8. And Rice is a very good one, but he's not the stylistic 8 that I think supports the left-hand side enough. When you watch Rice play and he's on the ball, you often find that he ends up playing passes internally or to the right. He does play passes to the left, but I feel that there is an emphasis on the way that Rice kind of moves the play towards the right side of the field. Try and do the right hand. So that's my left arm, but I know on the camera it's the other way around. So like he tries to like move the play more so through the middle and to the right, but less so, even though he does do it, but to the left. So this kind of structure we've got in midfield has almost impacted that. When we had Granit Xhaka in that position, it was very different. When we had Granit Xhaka in the left 8 role, Arsenal was a lot more balanced. There was a lot of balance to the Arsenal midfield. And in 23-24, when we were so dominant, of course, we'd started the season off with having a left footer in the left 8 role because Havertz played a lot there. And in the second half of the season, gradually that changed. And we changed the system. And I think that obviously kind of caught teams out and they weren't as prepared for it. Now they know the system. They know the Rice left 8. They know Odegaard. They know the centre forward. They know Martinelli and Saka. And we've played kind of this same system for so long without much variety that it's become easier to defend against. So I think that's a big part to play. And that's why we need variation. That's why I wanted Eze, because I think he could also have played left 8. I think he could have played that left 8 role and we could have moved Rice back and we could have had Zubimendi and Rice rotating. But when you've got Rice and Marino and Norgard and Zubimendi, the desire, of course, the necessity to sign a left 8 obviously does diminish. So, yeah, I don't know where else to go from that point. Kieran says off social media, but had heard Fabrizio saying Liverpool wanting to test the waters for Barcola. Has there been any more on that? If he's available, then get him. I've not heard about the Barcola stuff, but I'd love Barcola. But the price tag I saw being quoted was like 100 odd million. So I don't see Arsenal being able to do that. Duchess of Arsenal says, silent listener, but I do need to comment on this. We need a new attacking coach to work with the team. We need fresh ideas. Carl says, how do we fix the left side issue? You see Odegaard, Saka and White and Timber overload. The right-hand side, is this what we need to be switching to, occasionally doing the same, therefore, on the left? Potentially, Carl. Potentially, that's what needs to change. What we need to change mainly, though, is how we approach attacks. It needs more aggression. It needs more zip. It needs to have people looking up, seeing Gyökeres on the shoulder of the final defender and playing a ball in behind the defence. We need to coax opposition defences further up the field to play higher lines, and we need to turn the ball over quickly and move the ball quickly up the field. We need to be more efficient in our attacks, and we need to be high at creating more high-quality chances. And when they come, we need to be finishing them with a high level of quality. And hopefully Gyökeres changes that. I do think people have overreacted from pre-season, 100%. And I do think pre-season is not an indicator of necessarily the season that will come. Just look at the pre-season that we had before the Invincibles. Look at the pre-season we had before the 23-24 season where we broke those records. They didn't inform what we ended up seeing on the pitch during those seasons. So it's not a tell. It gives us some indications about certain things, and it certainly will give us indications about issues that have maintained, like the left-hand side. But there's without a doubt a far, far greater reaction than there should be over the pre-season that we've had so far. Martin says, I think football should ditch the whole Guardiola-inspired pass between the keeper and the central defenders again as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that feel Pep Guardiola's ruined football with how he's changed the game. Rich says, should Arteta be doing more to support Martinelli's game? I mean, tactically, systematically, yes, there is definitely an argument for that. Bailey says, with Nwaneri playing on the right last season, does this confirm a right side bias as when he moves to the middle, he will unconsciously prefer moving to the right? I think it's more about the role, like the role of that right 8. It's not a 10 role, is it? We don't play with a 10. We play with a right 8 and we play with a left 8. The right 8 is slightly more advanced than the left 8, but it's still on the right. And so I think that structure of the midfield leads us to emphasize the right-hand side of our attacks more so than the left-hand side. That's the feeling I get with it. Salahuddin says, thoughts on Carlos Baleba? Great player. If he goes to Man United, they've signed a really good player. You know, our defensive midfield, our kind of that part of the pitch in terms of signings is done. I don't expect any more signings there like Baleba. And overlapping fullback, says Nasir. Yeah, that definitely would help, but we don't play with an overlapping fullback, which is, you know, to our detriment, I think. And I think a traditional left back actually would have been not a bad idea. And I've seen some people suggesting maybe we should use Timber and White as fullbacks again. We did do that at points at the start of last season, you'll probably remember, until White had his issues and and Timber had to come to the right-hand side. So I'm intrigued to see if we ever play games with Timber and White. We almost forgot that was a reality for us, but it is something that we could try and do. It is something that we could see, and it's not entirely ruled out. Clive says, can you imagine X if we lose it? Oh, Clive, why? Why have you said that, man? I don't want to imagine X if we lose. Frankly, if we do lose at Old Trafford, I will be annoyed. You know, if Arsenal want to win the league, we have to win at Old Trafford. We have to be very kind of clear about this. Like, if Arsenal want to win the title, you've got to win games like Old Trafford. And we've not done that on a consistent enough basis over the last however many years. We've had decent records there in more recent times than we have done. You know, we're not really losing there. We did pick up a win in, what was it, 2020, I think, and 2023, I think, maybe 24. But we need to be winning that game. Like, it's not a case of, like, you know, we think about what the meltdown might be if we don't win, because I empathise with frustration. You know, I'll be up there at Old Trafford, I'm hoping, and I don't really want to see another failed attempt to win there. I've never seen us win at Old Trafford in the flesh. I've been up there a few times now, and I've not yet seen it happen. So I'm hoping this season's going to be a first for that. I really, really do. Kieran says, thoughts on the growing view in the community that we should try switching Odegaard and Rice. I both seem much more incisive with their passing on those sides and would help the left-hand side dynamic. I wouldn't be against seeing it. I would not be against seeing it at all. So, yeah, I would like to see what it would do. I'm not convinced it's the answer, I'll be honest with you, but I'd be curious to see if Odegaard was given more free. I don't necessarily think it's as much about swapping Rice and Odegaard. I actually think it's about more structurally the midfield. I would change the 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1 as a foundation. I know Arteta will tell me, as he has done, that we don't play with a 4-3-3. We play with lots of different structures. We don't have a single formation, execs, whatever. But ignoring that, which I think is deflection, I would personally play a 4-2-3-1. I would give Odegaard a more freer, more natural number 10 role in the midfield. And then I would focus more so on Zubamendi and Rice being right and left-sided 6/8s. Because I believe that Zubamendi is good progressing the ball and progressing himself up the field. And I think he can play a role that sees him move further forwards and into the opposition half and into that kind of suffocating sphere of horseshoe football. You know, I would play that double pivot. So you've got Rice and Zubamendi kind of going back and forth. And then you've got Odegaard in the middle being more free to support the right and the left. That's how I would personally structure the midfield, because I think it would make us less predictable. It would stop opposition teams from being able to kind of mark out one space of the field that contains both two of our most impactful players in Saka and Odegaard. And it would allow us to create more space. I think it would encase us to create more. It would stretch teams more because Odegaard would be moving more freer over the pitch. Like, I think that the 4-2-3-1 foundation with this current setup with Rice and Zubamendi would suit us more than the 4-3-3 structure of the 4-1-2-3 that we play currently. We currently play in a 4-1-2-3. That's the 4-3-3 that we play. There's the Zubamendi, previously Partey role, and then there is the right and left 8, with the right 8 being slightly further pushed than the left. But I think that we'd get more from a 4-2-3-1. We've not seen that yet. I want to see it, but we've not seen it yet. I like the days of Coquelin and Santi Cazorla and Ozil. Like that was a really creative midfield. We didn't have the threat necessarily in our attack beyond Alexis. We lacked kind of quality on the right. We lacked the centre forward. We lacked the defence, during that time. I'm convinced if you had the midfield of Ozil, Santi Cazorla and Coquelin in the current team, I'd be very curious to see how that would have done in this current setup of Arsenal, because it was a very effective midfield. And if you look at Liverpool's midfield, and I talked about this with Andrew yesterday on the Arscast as well, if you look at the role that Szoboszlai is being asked to play now, there's something of the Santi role about what Szoboszlai is going to be asked to do this season, because I actually thought that Arne Slot wouldn't do what he's doing. I thought it would be Gravenberch, McAllister, and Wirtz. I thought that Szoboszlai would be demoted to the bench. But I watched their game against Athletic Club the other day, and the role of Gravenberch in kind of a tandem with Szoboszlai playing a more deeper role and a deep line playmaker role rather than an attacking role, in the same sense as he was last season, with Wirtz playing kind of a freer second striker role, if you like, behind Ekitike, that I think has given Liverpool incredible balance. And I'm really worried about Liverpool for next season. Like, Liverpool are threatening beyond, anything else. Very scary team, especially with the fullbacks they've also brought in. It's a very, 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 very scary team. There's some holes in it. They lack that centre-half signing. They lack that defensive midfield signing. They focus very much on those attacking signings. And I actually think somewhat it would be a mistake for them to spend 100 and whatever million on Isak. If they took that 100 and whatever million on Isak and instead spent it on another centre-half and another defensive midfielder, I'd personally be more scared of Liverpool than I am if they were to sign Isak on top of what they already have. If they'd have taken that, if they take that Isak money and spend it on a defensive midfielder and another centre-half to be the long-term replacement for Van Dijk, I'm more concerned about Liverpool then than I am if they don't do that and sign Isak instead and play him instead of Ekitike, and Ekitike moves to the bench, or plays in a wide area as he can do. So that's kind of where I'm at. Thank you, Patrick, for your kind words. Very much appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed the listen. If you haven't listened to it, you can go listen to it on the Arscast, of course, podcast, wherever you get your podcast. But that's kind of where I'm at on that side. But it's just theory, isn't it? I'm not a coach. I'm just theorizing. You have to say these things with the veil that you are just a fan. Take the journalism hat off, just a fan. And these ideas could be really naive. And if Arteta ever was to hear the words back, you might say, this guy hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. And maybe I don't. But that's just how I absorb what I've seen. And I'm trying to think of solutions to the problems. And I'm trying to think, if we change this structure in this way and have kind of a more freer number 10 role and the pivot sixes, that might give us a bit more freedom and unpredictability and variety in our attack. It might bring some more support to the left-hand side. I'd be interested to see who you would start on the left and right of that six. Would you play Zubi on the left to give the left more progression from kind of a passing standpoint, and then play Rice on the right-hand side? It's something to consider. It's definitely something to consider. If you ever look at the England-Spain final in the Euros, where England, of course, no, not the women's one. We want was it Euro 2024? It was, wasn't it? Yeah, it's 24. That England team started with a midfield of Rice, Kobbie Mainoo, and Phil Foden. Or Bellingham. I guess Bellingham more. So Foden, I guess, was more to the left-hand side. Bellingham played the 10 role. So you had Rice and Kobbie Mainoo and Bellingham. So Bellingham kind of plays, obviously, what he wants, plays behind Kane. Rice was the deepest of those three. And Kobbie Mainoo, of course, played kind of the box-to-box role, but could certainly provide plenty going forwards. And a lot was made, of course, of that. Now, I personally, think Conor Gallagher, I really like Conor Gallagher as a player. I think I think he's an excellent sign for Atletico Madrid, and I don't think it's any surprise that he's been a really big success there. But you had either Gallagher or Eze that could have played instead of Kobbie Mainoo, and I think would have been an interesting option for us there. We put too much emphasis on defence under Southgate. We were too cautious, and that didn't help. But Rice's role for me, and I'd always said, I've always thought that Rice was going to be Arsenal's Rodri. But now we've brought in Zubimendi, we know he is going to play this box-to-box role instead. So the structure of Arsenal is a conundrum that still needs to be solved, and Arteta has to find a way of solving that. So we'll see what happens. Enoxinho says, another good thing about the 4-2-3-1 is that you have better roles for Trossard and Havertz too. Havertz's best days were at Leverkusen. He was a 10 or a second striker type. Well, it's interesting because when Havertz was at Bayer Leverkusen, he did play as an attacking midfielder, but he played as well in a tandem. He played with Julian Brandt at Bayer Leverkusen when he was there. So it wasn't like he was playing like a free second striker number 10 role. He was playing, I'm trying to think who it was who played defensive midfield. I feel like, was it Andrik? Was it Andrik that played defensive midfield? Or the other thing in my mind is that it was a Brazilian player. I'm seeing if I can get up what it was. So the midfield was no, it's not that one. This one, Havertz, Brandt, Aranguiz, who was is Chilean, right? Yes, it was Charles Aranguiz who was playing kind of the six. No, it was a South American playing the six, and you had Julian Brandt and Havertz playing ahead of him, which is kind of more similar to what we do now, except Julian Brandt and Havertz are much more forward-thinking players as a pair than Ødegaard and Rice are. So the balance was kind of more so, all the emphasis was on Aranguiz to be the kind of holding six, the protector of that back line, which contained some very, very impressive players, during that time. You still had Jonathan Tah, of course, who's become the player that we all know that he is today. You still had Sven Bender, of course, as well, that was in that back line too. And his brother eventually went and played for Leverkusen. Or did they both play for Dortmund at the same time, or was it Leverkusen at the same time? One of the two teams. So yeah, that Havertz idea works. And I think actually if you played a 4-2-3-1, you would get more from Havertz playing the second striker. But the Bayer Leverkusen example is slightly off because Julian Brandt, of course, played alongside him rather than playing that kind of free 10 role on his own. I think he may have done on occasion played on his own, but it was mainly with Julian Brandt next to him. Eddie says, what are changes you have seen in preseason so far compared to the team that we played last season? Is it just me, or do we struggle to score from open play? Well, the key thing that we are seeing is perhaps some more directness about how we approach games. There's more of an urgency to kind of getting the ball up the field in terms of kind of long balls down the line at times. But it's difficult really to assess too much because I don't think we've seen our starting 11 yet. For me, our starting 11, if everybody is fully fit, match ready to go, the 11 that I would like to see personally is Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly, Zubimendi, Rice in a pivot, Ødegaard as a 10, Saka, Gyökeres, Madueke. That would be the 11 that I'd go for if it was up to me. That's how I would play it. But we haven't seen that yet. And we may see that Saturday, depending on fitness. But I think Ben White's probably in line to start. I think Ben White's had an excellent preseason. It's not a downer on White, me picking Timber. I just really, really love Timber, and I think he's an excellent player, and I just appreciate the balance he brings to our team. But Ben White has had an excellent preseason, and if he starts, I have no issue with that at all. So, yeah. Aloy says, Tom told everyone several times that that signing of Eze was independent of moving for any current player. But he has now changed his storyline. He told us that signing a left winger would depend on sales. Yes, and that, as I said in the first part of the show, Aloy, that was the previous understanding. That was what we understood before, was that Eze was separate to the sales of a left winger, as in a Trossard. That's what I said. It wasn't like any sales. It wasn't independent of moving any players on. I always said that Eze was dependent upon Arsenal moving some players on first, but it was separate more so to the Leo Martinelli futures, as the chat box will now, I'm hoping, will certainly confirm that is indeed what I said, that we had to move on your Vieiras, your Nelsons, your Lokongas to open up funds to potentially move for an Eze. And that could still happen. But what I did get slightly off was the Nwaneri influence. That Nwaneri's, because the information really wasn't available at that point until practically this week, that Nwaneri's contract had a far greater level of influence on the kind of the rolling back of Arsenal's, not aggress, that's the wrong word, but just the discussions around a move for Eze. The interest hasn't disappeared. It's not gone. It's still there. It's not to say it's impossible. But I didn't say what you said. And, as people are pointing out to you in the chat box, of course, that's not what I said. But I did say that it was Eze's future was independent of both the Madueke deal, which it was, because as we've talked about, Arsenal have wanted 3 attacking signings. So it was always independent from the Madueke move, but that it was more so that it's not necessarily tied to the sale of Trossard or Martinelli. And initially, it was a feeling that Nwaneri's contract hadn't had like as much of a influence as it turns out that it does. But what I could have done, and you tell me if you prefer this, is that when I found out this week some new, more up-to-date information that was contrary to the situation that we'd been talking about for a little while, what I could have done is I could have just kept that to myself. I could have just been like, well, that's different to what I previously said, so I'm not going to say it because it makes me look a bit silly. But that's not how I operate. I don't want to do that. I don't want to keep things to myself. I have no pride in that aspect. There's nothing wrong with new information coming out that's contrary to what you previously thought and had been told and what your understanding was. That's just how the transfer window works. Things change. The situations change. So I'd much rather speak as if and tell you what I know as I know. And the reality is that the situation has changed. But it changed a little while ago. We just wasn't privy to the information that we are privy to now. So that's the reality. I'm sorry. So that's just where I'm at. Eddie says, do you see Zinni staying with Calafiori's injury concerns? Miles Lewis-Skelly will have a similar situation as Timber last season, where he had to play the majority of the season. I'm at 50-50, I think. There's not really been loads of interest in Zinni. I heard a little rumor about Fulham. I know Dortmund have previously had interest in him. I think he's happy in London. His wage is obviously £150,000 per week, which for a player who's surplus to requirements is a lot of money. It was about what was right to be paid to him when we signed him from Man City at 24, but at 28, when you're not in the team, that's quite a lot of money. So that's a difficult situation. I have concerns about Calafiori as well and his injuries, but Timber can also play that position as well, I guess you could argue. So we have options. We definitely have options. Anne says, Tom, how does Ethan's contract affect Eze? WTF, pardon my language. What are we doing to see the same BS? And when we come up short again, we're back here. Well, I mean, it should be quite. I mean, I don't say this disrespectfully, Anthony, but it is quite simple. Ethan Nwaneri is a central attacking player. Eze is predominantly, and as we're told, seen by Arsenal as more of a central attacking player. Now that we have signed Ethan up to a new deal and he doesn't look like he's leaving, the need to sign a central attacking player, which Eze predominantly is, has, in the club's eyes, not been as important. And if they are to add a third attacking player, as I reported in yesterday's piece, it would be more likely to be a more traditional left-sided player if Leo Trossard leaves. I'm not saying that Eze definitely won't happen. I'm just saying at this point in time, if I was a betting man, I'd say probably isn't going to happen. So it is actually quite simple, Anthony. Now, you're well within your rights to disagree. You're well within your rights to disagree. Whether Arsenal have done the right thing there. If you think they should sign Eze anyway, it's a valid opinion. You can absolutely feel that way. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. I'd love us to still sign Eze. I'd love us to still go for him. But that's not the reality. Grant says, yesterday you said you just had a feeling about Eze. Now we find out you were told something not cool. Well, I mean, I did say that I had a feeling based upon conversations I'd had. But Grant, if you don't want to listen anymore, feel free to leave. It doesn't. It's water off a duck's back for me. Aoife says, Tom, Anthony has a point. Eze brings threat on the left hand side. Ethan and Max do on the right. We will continue to have a lopsided attack. Again, that's why I've said I want us to sign him, and I said within your rights to still want him. And the argument that he can play more so on the left, whereas Nwaneri's more so on the right, is a valid opinion, and I think it's valid enough that I'd like to see Arsenal sign him. That you're preaching to the choir here with me on this. Like, I'm not in disagreement with you on that at all. I think Arsenal should still sign Eze. I think if they successfully sell Vieira and Nelson and Lokonga and Trossard and Carl Hein and anyone else I'm forgetting, they should look to sign Eze and still also try and bring in a left winger if they can. I'd love them to see him go and do that. I would love to. But I'm just telling you that's just not how they're viewing it. It's not how I view it. I'm telling you how they view it. So I'm with you. Like, I'm 100% with you. I think Anthony's right. We should go and sign it. And I'm frustrated that we might not do that. So, I don't really know what you want me to say in that regard. A couple more questions before we wrap up. Maya says it's just all silly. And Tom's words are silly, saying that Eze and Madueke deals are different. It's like we are not going to offer a new contract before this. Why does this change things? I don't think it's silly, mate. I think that's pretty harsh, mate, to be honest, considering the fact that, as I've always said, they are separate. It's been treated separately. And the reason that it's treated separately is very simple. Arsenal were not, at that point, guaranteed to have Nwaneri signing a new deal at the point where their interest and their formalisation of interest in Eze was there. Madueke was always wanted because we needed to bring in the competitive option on the right, but it was a bonus that Madueke could offer Arsenal something on the left, but they sorted that out. But Nwaneri signing his new contract and guaranteeing his future for the foreseeable means that the desire to sign a central attacking player, which Eze is seen predominantly as, has diminished. It really is that simple. I don't know what I've said that's silly. Feel free to let me know and why, because that's pretty harsh, I think, considering the fact of how I've explained it today and how we've talked about the whole situation today. So, but again, feel free to let me know. I think we're probably going to wrap up there. I've more than an hour on this topic, more than an hour of discussing this. I have to accept that there's going to be frustration and anger about Arsenal's situation. I am frustrated. I'm sure you're frustrated. For me, if we don't sign that third attacking signing, I will be disappointed come the end of the window. And if Arsenal have kind of set out to have, like, if you say they've got like these tick boxes and they wanted 3 attacking players and they only signed 2 of them, then they've left a box unticked. So that will go down as a, it'll go down as a failure, that specific desire. But what I would just kind of close this on is that don't let that one unticked box, if it remains unticked, take away from everything that that Arsenal have done in this window. Because they have signed the centre forward we've all been craving for. They have signed another attacking option. Whether you agree with it or not, we have to wait and see what he does in Madueke. I'm personally excited to see it. They've signed, in my opinion, the best number 6 on the market. And they've added depth to a team now that has, before we sign anyone else this window, and regardless of who leaves as well, other than Trossard, who would need replacing, 2 competitive players in every single position, which is what you want. It's what you want from a squad. That's how you build it. To have 2 competitive players. Not that we have a player that can cover 7 positions, so we've got 2 competitive players. 2 separate players in every single position. That's where we're at. And that's where I want this squad to be. Thank you for listening. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Let's see what the news brings us. I will, Anthony, do a phone-in show at some point. I don't know what else I can really say or add or change. It's not about changing minds or anything. It's just explaining where things are at. So, yeah. But thank you so much, as always, for listening. And thank you for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.